gentlemen. Quick heads up. We have mics on both sides of the room, so give like a nod or a look to see your Lindsay, and we'll get it going to you. Reminder, lunch next door afterwards. Hope you're hungry, and let's get going.
We're so cozy. Do we need microphones?
Ron, first off, thank you for...
I can hear you.
All right. Test dummy here. Thank you for doing this first off, Ron. And as you go through the ups and downs of this season, what stays with you as far as where this season went and where you want this team to be long term?
Yeah, no, it's you look at last year and things seemed to go really well for us. The big difference this year is we couldn't score like we did last season, right? I think we were first in shooting percentage last year. This year we're 28th. We were fourth, I think, in goals for last year, and this year we're 29th. So that's an area we certainly have to look at, is to try and figure out why it didn't happen. And then, there was some positives on the flip side. The save percentage of goaltenders was better. We're the only team that didn't make the playoffs whose defense is in the top 10. So defensively we were solid, and we just have to find a way to score more goals. So I think that's a critical part to what we have to address here in the offseason.
Ron, how do you go about determining what the true ceiling is for this current roster, whether it is last year's ceiling or this year's ceiling? Because I would think that would go a long way toward your determining how much alteration needs to go into the roster for next season.
Yeah, no, and that's something we do every year, right? We did it after the first season when it didn't go so well. We went out and signed some free agents in Burakovsky and Schultz and Jones. We made the deal for Bjorkstrand. We picked up Tolvey on waivers early in the next season. The second season went real well. Our shooting percentage was probably higher than it should have been. It was probably higher than the guys' average. This year was probably lower than their average. So we do expect some of that to come back, but we can't sit here and count on that, right? No different last season. Season ends, we have the same thing. We have conversations with our management team. We talk about, things we might have done differently or look to do moving forward. We have conversations with our coaching staff as to what they see and their interpretations on systems and players that we can maybe tweak and do differently. We look at our team as a whole. We look at our team as individuals. We do a deep dive with our R&D. So there's a lot of things, and then I have discussions with my ownership group on kind of what we'd like to do and where we want to go, and we put a plan in place. So that's really what we're in the midst of right now, and we'll continue to do over the next few weeks.
Ron, when we look at what the young guys were able to do this season, and not even just the late call-ups, I mean, Shane obviously made an impact late, but the guys that were mainstays on this team that are still just 21 years old, what is the optimism maybe surrounding their future as they continue to develop?
Yeah, no, listen, if you look at our pipeline, it's very bright, but there's a process to that, right? It's, Matty, I'm sure will tell you his season didn't go as great as he'd hoped, and we still forget he's a young kid in the league, 2021. The guys we called up at the end in Winterton, started in the AHL this year at 20, turned 21, and Shane started at 19. He should be playing junior, and he's playing in the American League. So there's a lot of good pieces in the pipeline. The challenge is bringing them in, sort of intertwining them with what we have in our lineup and helping them have success. The problem with this is there's nothing that's ever a linear progression in making this work. And there's going to be times next year where those kids struggle. And it's trying to help them get through those and continue to grow and get better and better as we move forward. But there's a lot of good pieces in the pipeline for sure.
Ron, speaking of that pipeline, this franchise is obviously still very young. You've talked about having to build this pipeline from scratch. Are you at a point now where you think, at least philosophically, you're a little more comfortable potentially dipping into a pipeline or dipping into draft capital to try to improve the big club?
Yeah, no, I think we're certainly at that point. This will be our fourth draft, right? So in the previous three, we should have had 21 picks. I think we used 28. Plus, we've signed 5 or 6 free agents over that time. So we go into this draft with 9 picks as well, which I think there's only 3 teams more than us as far as draft picks in this draft. So I'm not saying we're sitting here and going to trade them all, but I'm not sitting here saying we're going to draft them all. We certainly look to use some of that draft capital if we could, similar to what we did in the first offseason with Bjorkstrand. If there's something there that makes our team better, then yeah, we're happy to do that. So.
Ron, have you made a decision yet on whether all the coaches are returning this season? And if so, what did you think about the job they did this year?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's part of the process we go through now, right? Like, as I talked about earlier, meeting with the coaching staff, the management team, all that stuff, and assessing it. So we're still in that process now. There's certain things, and like I talked about the defensive aspect of the game, we were really good. So there's kudos for that. This was kind of a unique season, and that's where we kind of got to dig through. I mean, last season, everybody has injuries. I'm not using that as an excuse, but last year our first major injury happened after the All-Star break where Burakovsky tore his groin. Before that, we had guys out for one game, maybe 2 games. This year it was totally different in that regard. We lost Tandem in game 1. He's out for like the next 12 games. Some things that we don't talk about, like Eberle ended up breaking his hand in game 4, but he continued to play for the next 6 weeks with a broken hand. We lost Burakovsky after game 6, and I think he played 1 game between then and December 29th. So there was a lot of things that affected our chemistry as a team and as a lineup. And I think we're being young, we're not at the point where we have some of those kids that were ready to step in and push. As you saw early in the season versus later in the season, it went a little bit better for them, right? So we're still there and develop that. So there's a lot of things we have to look at and factor in, and we'll continue to do that in the next few weeks.
So can you confirm at this point that Dave Hackstall is coming back next season, or you can't do that yet?
Well, you're going to read into it one way or the other, but this is the process we do every year, and that's what we're in right now. So.
Sorry, one follow-up. You said Eberle broke his hand in game 4. Was that before or after the skate slash?
That was before. It was a Colorado game at home when he was in that fight. So, and the other thing, even when we got that 11-0-2 streak, I thought we were finally starting to play kind of like signs of last year, and then we lost Dunn and Beniers in the game in Columbus, and we had 10 guys out dealing with a virus at the time through that stretch, right? So there's things that we deal with internally that aren't out there, but it was just one of those years and some of those things that happened.
Ron, what can you share about the messages you wanted players to take away from your exit interviews and key messages you may have heard back from them as well?
Yeah, no, the biggest thing, when we had the run we had last year and we got in the first round and beat the defending Cup champs and took the Dallas Stars to 7, the message was, don't think this is going to be easy next year because it's going to be harder. I think in some regards they heard that, but I don't know if they necessarily believed it. 1-4-1, I think, out of the gate is not really what I wanted to have from our guys coming in. So the message again was a little bit more stern this year in the sense that, hey, we can't have this happen again. We got to be ready from day 1 of camp, and we got to have a much better start than we had this season.
Ron, just curious what your thoughts were on Matty's season kind of overall. Obviously, he had the dip in points, but how did you kind of view his second year and what to make of it?
Well, Matty's Matty. The good thing about him is he's a quality kid. He's a character individual. He continued to work hard in practice. He continued to be the person we think he is around the team in the locker room. Obviously, on ice, it didn't go as well for him. He's one of those guys. The shooting percentage, wasn't as great. I think he had a tough stretch last season, but it happened more in the middle of the season. This year it happened right out of the gate, right? He went 13 games, he didn't score, and I think that kind of weighs on him as a young kid and your first time going through a contract year. There's a lot of things that factor into your game, but I have no concerns about Matty's game long term, and he'll be a big part of this organization for a lot of years moving forward.
Ron, how do you boost scoring? What's the simplest way? Do you feel like it's a system change or a tweak, or is it as simple as going out and finding maybe a couple of pieces that are more proven scorers to bring in and add to the squad?
Yeah, I mean, we'll look at every angle. I mean, the beauty is we have the cap space, so we're going to look at free agents. We're going to look at possible trades with other teams, very much similar to what we did in year 1. We have the draft capital, as we talked about earlier, to throw those into deals or move things. we have a lot of prospects that teams like. There's some we don't want to give up, and there's some we may have to if the right deal comes along. So we'll look at everything that we have to look at to try and make our team better. It's important for us to get back on the winning track, and our goal is to get back in the playoffs next year.
Ron, after trading Wenny away at the deadline, you got a good long look at Jared McCann down the middle. What did you make of his time there, and do you see him moving forward as a possible solution at center, or would you like to try to keep him out on the wing?
Yeah, that was a tough situation for the team, right? We go 7-2-1 coming into the trade deadline, and we lose Dunn in Calgary, and then we couldn't get a deal done with Wenny and had to move him. So in essence, it's like losing two big pieces out of your lineup the last 20 games, and it kind of reflected. We lost Schwartz, I think, 3 shifts into the first game after the trade deadline as well, and then all of a sudden we got a losing streak, and the season is behind us. But Jared, I thought when we put him in the middle, played well. I think for me, in an ideal world, we can find a spot on the wing for him and get somebody else in the middle. But I think it's a good fallback plan to know that if we have to go that route, if we have injuries, that he can step in there and play well for us in the middle of the ice.
Hey, Ron, thanks for doing this. Do you think your farm system is sort of ahead of schedule maybe? So you've got so many breakout performances going on. Is it a little bit even surprising you all?
Well, I think it's credit to our amateur staff, right, and our development staff. These guys work extremely hard in finding talent and then drafting them and then developing them. So, last year in Coachella, we were one of the oldest teams. I think we're the 3rd oldest team. This year we went to the 20th oldest team. We have a lot of our kids from our first draft and some from our second draft finally coming into the pipeline. And that team not only had a good year, it won the division, got a first-round bye. So the exciting thing for me is for those kids is they're playing in a winning environment. They're learning how to win. They're going to get into tough playoff games. They're going to see what that's all about, and they're going to experience that. We've been able, with guys losing out, to bring in some of our other prospects in. I mean, Yager Furcus, who led the Western Hockey League in scoring, is still playing and having a great playoffs. David Goyette lost out, so we brought him the other day in. He played actually on Sunday. Carson Raycroft, you all saw we signed, and he's now on his way to Coachella, so he'll get in there. Yanni Newman, who set a record it stood for over 40 years, the most goals by an under-20 player in the top league in Finland, with 26, is in there and playing. He's got 2 goals in 4 games, and looks good there. We never mentioned Malagard over in Sweden, but this guy's been a top 2-line center in the top Swedish league as a young kid, and playing really good hockey there too. So, and I know when I say this, I'm missing things like Coco over there is now in the final round and having a great playoff in net for them. So there's a lot of really good pieces. It's different in hockey than in some of the other sports. It takes time to get them there. And as I said earlier, it's not a linear progression. We forget that they're 18, 19, 20 years old. Sometimes it goes great. Sometimes they struggle, and we have to help them get out of that. But, we're really excited about what we have coming. And now the key is kind of building the team here and integrating those pieces that we think are now starting to come and making us more successful moving forward.
Hey, Ron, a season ago, beyond the scoring, you guys played with a real edge. You had the forecheck going on. You hit quite a bit. Hit numbers were down this year, and I know there was times the team and coaches were both saying that the effort wasn't there for full 60 minutes at times. What did you kind of make of your guys' play this year in that regard, and where that might have fallen off a little bit?
Yeah, I thought we were streaky, so that leads to being inconsistent. I think some of the times we went into the losing streaks, it was kind of an injury here or there, but we have to find a way to sort of pull ourselves out of it. Some of it deals to the chemistry or lack thereof, when we couldn't stay with set lines, where last year we had sort of lines running and everybody knew each other and how it went, and we were kind of constantly, it seemed, sort of plugging a guy here or trying a guy there to do it differently. But certainly we want to get back to the full identity we had last year and being a team that when people talk about us, they say we play fast and we play hard, and that's our goal starting in September, or actually starting now. So when we get on the ice in September, we're ready to roll.
Ron, you mentioned the trade market and the chances to add through that maybe down the road. How much have you assessed how easy it may be to add via free agency versus the trade market coming up here in the summer?
We assess it. I don't know if we have you always have guys you think, okay, I'd like to go get this guy, whether it's in free agency or whether it's trade. Whether it happens or not is a totally different animal, right? Like, we went 2 rounds last year, and everybody would have thought we were pretty happy with our team, but we tried and kicked the tires on some big things. We tried and looked at some smaller things. It just didn't fall the way we wanted it to fall last summer, but hopefully we can do something different this year. But we constantly, in our pro meetings, in September and in January and coming up here next month, are assessing what's out there in free agency, what's maybe available in trades. My calls to other GMs and stuff. So we're looking at all those tools, and we're not afraid to do something if the right person is there to help us be more successful.
Ron, you mentioned the improved save percentage this year. What can you say about what your tandem was able to accomplish and how important that is going forward?
Yeah, no, it was good. It was obviously disappointing to see Ruby get hurt again, but Joey stepped in during that window and played fantastic. Both guys, really from January 1 through the end of the season were really, really good for us. We feel comfortable with those 2 guys in our net moving forward. As I said, the defensive portion, the top 9, we were 9th in the league in defense goals against, so we feel good with 6 of those 7 guys under contract coming back. I thought the progression of Riker down the stretch was really good too. So, that part of the game we feel comfortable with and confident in. Now we have to go fix the forward group and make some tweaks to get the scoring back to where it needs to be.
Hey, Ron, we heard from a few players that they plan to watch the playoffs and try and learn some things. How closely are you going to watch the playoffs? And does looking at the roster construction of some of the most successful teams kind of impact what you plan to accomplish this summer?
Well, we watched 4 games yesterday, and there's 4 today. So, yeah, I'll be watching a lot of hockey over the next little bit. The U18s, the players stopped playing, but on the management side and the scouting side, we still have a lot of stuff to do. The U18s start in Finland, so our people are going there for that. The World Championships start after that. The Combine, happens towards the end of or the early part of June. Then we have the draft. Then we have free agency. We have dev camps. There's a lot of things we're doing, but certainly at this point, there's guys that we have our eyes on, whether it's free agents or potential trades. And again, we're watching them, especially in the playoffs. How they play at this time of year is very important. So we look at a lot of those things for sure.
Ron,
you'll be looking at this off season. I'm sure you identified a lot of those issues during the season, and I'm sure you tried to find fixes with your management and coaching staff during the season. What makes you confident that you can find answers that for whatever reason the team wasn't able to find during the season?
Well, I think the thing is we've done it before, right? We did it after year 1. We found some issues. We went out in the summertime and addressed the issues, and it changed in season 2. And that's our goal now. We have to, as a management team and a scouting staff, come together with the right ideas and try and get the things done, whether it's free agents, whether it's trades, to make this team more successful next year. And that's our plan, to have a big off season and try and address those issues.
Is it addressing it with new players coming in rather than with the existing players?
And that's what we go through in this 2-week assessment, right? Are there players that we need to move out to try and bring others in that we think can do a better job? Do we have people in our lineup? We still think we have a pretty solid core in our group, and but we're looking at everything we have to look at right now to make us better.
Ron, obviously there are a handful of guys who are out of contract now that the season has ended. I know the season just ended a couple of days ago, but can you give us any updates on where things stand progress-wise or talk-wise with some of those players?
So yeah, I mean, we've got there's 2 different groups, the UFAs and the RFAs, right? So probably the biggest on the RFAs would be Matty and Tolvi, and we'll get conversations going real soon with them on their agents and trying to get something done there. Yamamoto's the other RFA with Arbright, so we have to make a decision whether we qualify him or not. Because if we qualify him, then he can take us to Arb. And then on the UFAs, some decisions on those guys. We had conversations in the exit meetings and kind of let them know kind of where we think we are now. But obviously some of that could change as we move forward and what we can and can't do with our lineup between now and the draft and as we head into the free agency period.
Hey, Ron, I'm curious regarding Andre and the injury issues he has had. his lack of production this year, how much of that do you attribute to injuries, and how much of it do you attribute to not just getting the job done? Secondly, did you see enough positives from Shane in that last stint that you're counting on him to break in camp with you guys next year?
Yeah, so the first one on Andre, I mean, he was our leading scorer last year when he tore his groin. We had the 10-day break, which, selfishly I think is way too long. Players might think differently, but you do that and then you fly all the way across the country, and 19 seconds into his first shift, he tears his groin. Going into the deadline last year, we thought he was going to be back within a week, and then he tore it again. So he missed a lot of hockey last year, didn't get to play in the playoffs for us for the rest of the season. Comes into this year feeling pretty good. Game 6 gets hurt, comes back one game, gets hurt again. And, it's not like injuries that you say, okay, he's got to train differently or train better for. Like when you break your collarbone, that's kind of a freak thing that happens, and now you're out 6 weeks. But here's a guy that missed, a lot of hockey last year, missed a lot of hockey this year, and as a result, he's not confident in who he is and what he can do, and I think that carried over into some of his game and his ability. I'm excited that he's going to go play in the World Championships. I think that's good for him to continue to play hockey and get some more games under his belt, and hopefully that helps him sort of get his timing and his skill set back where next year he's ready to go and be the player he was the first half of last season for us. In Shane's case, yeah, I mean, I've always seen things in his game that we like. I think he's come a long way in the last year in his development. I think he's much more confident. I think he's having fun again playing the game. And, the stint he had up here, I'm not sure could have went much better other than if he got the hat trick in Anaheim would have been really good. But, I thought his stretch was much better. And here's a kid that's 19 years old. I said playing the American League, ends up with 22 goals and I think 47 points in 57 games. That's pretty impressive for a young kid. So we see a bright future for Shane in the organization. I don't think there's any reason why he couldn't make our team coming out of camp. But again, it's not going to go smooth for him for 82 games. There's going to be stretches where it's going to struggle, and we need to be there to support him and help him through those tough times.
You mentioned it a few minutes ago, but what did you make of Riker's season? And he was scratched a fair amount of nights. Would you have liked to have seen him be in the lineup a little bit more than he was when he was up here?
Yeah, I think you always want your young guys to play, whether it's here. That's the reason why we set him down at the start of the season, was so he can continue to play. That stretch you're talking about was during that stretch where we were kind of on fire. We were 11-0-2 in that stretch, and unfortunately he was on the outside looking in. But he's a terrific kid. He continues to work hard, and I thought when he got the chance to get back in there, and especially for me down the stretch in some tough games, he really showed his development. So there's no doubt in my mind he's in our lineup coming out of camp next year. He's been that good.
Ron, at any point this season, did you feel like this team ever got a reputation for not being willing to fight back after some cheap shots, whether it was in the middle or the beginning of the year, and as such sort of had a target on their back and got bullied?
I don't know about that. There's not many teams that have the so-called heavyweight anymore. It's more by team toughness. There was a couple situations where guys get hit, guys went in. Did they fight? No. I mean, there's a debate sometimes too, right? Do you take a stupid penalty or an instigator and nullify a power play? It depends on the time of the game and what happens. But I've always been a believer in team toughness more than that one individual.
Ron, you mentioned the World Championships. Do you have a general idea of which of your guys are going off to play in those?
Yeah. So Belmar will play for Team France. Tatar will play for Team Slovakia. Grubauer will play for Team Germany. Burakovsky will play for Team Sweden. McCann, Tanev, and Alexiak will play for Team Canada. We probably had, in addition, 6 or 7 other guys that had the opportunity to go, and whether being banged up or for other reasons chose not to. And then we have one other player that is still on somebody's list, but we'll know more probably in the next 2 years. So until I know that, I'd rather not say his name. But so we have seven players playing in it as of right now.
Ron, speaking of those guys that were banged up, did Vince Dunn have a neck injury, and is that why it took so long to get him back on the ice and you were so hesitant with him, or was that just to give other guys a chance to play?
No, it was the injury. He got hit from behind into the boards, and he was dealing with a neck injury at that point. Came back and, eventually got in there and played a couple games and got hit kind of again and just didn't feel comfortable. So, rather than put him at risk or get him into that situation, we continue to do the rehab and treatment, but we fully expect him to be 100% for start of camp next year.
Was he one of those guys that was perhaps invited to play for Team Canada and chose not to, or the team chose not to?
I hate saying which guys chose not to because it doesn't send a good message for the guys. But yeah, I mean, he was certainly banged up and didn't play the last 20 games of the year. So, it's tough for Canada to take a guy that's missed 20 games, right? But
Ron, not a great face-off percentage last year. So you brought in Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. It got better. You even said it yourself. You can't go out there and do it for him. So is this team on the track that getting better inside the circle?
Well, I think we're 45% 2 years ago. We're 47.5 this year, so it's better, but it's still not where I'd like to see it. We need to get up over 50. I mean, if you can win the faceoffs, you start with possession of the puck, right? If you lose it, now you're chasing it and you got to get it back. So ideally for us, we're winning more of those faceoffs than losing it. And obviously that's another area as we look to add scoring. Is there somebody out there that can help us win faceoffs as well? So we start with the puck more than we chase it off of faceoffs.
Ron, you mentioned being excited for Andre to get a chance to go play at Worlds. I mean, what are you hoping with this many guys having that opportunity and going to play that they take away from sort of getting to play some of those meaningful games and represent their countries?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys are veteran guys. They've been through it. For Pierre-Edouard, I mean, to get him to see him play a 700th game, when you think that he didn't start playing till he was 29 years old in the NHL, that's an amazing thing, right? So excited to see him go back and play for his country. The biggest thing for me with Andre is just he hasn't played a lot of games, right? He missed over 30 games last year, missed over 30 games this year. He needs to play and get out there and handle pucks and be in situations. So the fact that he gets to play here for another 3-4 weeks, hopefully, is really going to be beneficial, I think, for his game.
Ron, Dave said on Saturday that conversations could be had about having a captain for next season. What would that process look like? Are you involved in those discussions, or is that something that's typically left up to the coach, the players in the room? Can you shed some light on that?
No, I would be involved in that. Yeah, no, we had talked about that as the season went along, at looking at naming a captain next year instead of going with the 4 assistant captains.
Ron, he ended up being your leading goal scorer again this year. Your kind of thoughts on Jared McCann's season and the way he's kind of grown throughout 3 years with you now at this point?
Yeah, I think he's come a long way. He's much more confident, I think, in his overall game. We all see the shot he has. It's really impressive. We see the speed that he has. So he's continued to improve. I know it wasn't the 40-goal season, but, he almost got 30 again, which is pretty impressive. So, we're excited that he chose to sign with us a couple years ago and stay with us. And we still think there's, more growth to his game, but, he's putting in the time and effort, and I'm sure he'll get there.